In this video, we will look at how the most brutal torture devices worked during the medieval period or Dark Ages. The medieval period or Middle Ages or Dark Ages became known as the most violent period in history. This period lasted for 1,000 years, from the 5th to the 15th century. During this time, the whole of Europe was covered in extreme cruelty. It was also during this period that the disgusting thoughts of people sprung up, which gave way to the invention of very brutal torture devices. Such devices were used to gather information or as punishment for things that were then considered sins, such as being heretics or believing in heresy, being gay or homosexual, and being a witch. They were also used as punishment for more serious crimes. And first on our list is the Iron Maiden. This is a vertical sarcophagus with spikes in it. It has a double door with spikes where the victim is inserted. When the door is closed, the vital internal organs of the victim will be pierced, but not so fatal. Because the spikes are short, the victim will not die immediately and will suffer for several hours before losing his or her life. What's worse is that 2 spikes will be inserted into the eye of the Iron Maiden. However, it is said to be just a mythical torture device because, according to experts, there is no recorded evidence in history that it was used in the Middle Ages. It was mentioned before, but only in the 1700s, a long time after the medieval period. One was found in a castle in Nuremberg, Germany, but it was in the 1800s. Brazen Bull. This is a hollow statue that actually looks like a real bull. The victim is inserted into the hole in its side. But unlike the Iron Maiden, it doesn't have spikes, but fire. When the door is closed, the wood under the statue will be set on fire. Because the statue is sealed, people outside hear the cry of the victim differently. It sounds exactly like the sound of a bull. It is said that people were very happy with this kind of event as they did not really see what was happening inside. And what's even worse is that the one who invented it, Perillus, became its first victim. He was said to have created the brazen bull to give to Phalaris, a cruel ruler. But instead of getting a reward, Perillus himself was put inside the brazen bull. Later, it is said that Phalaris was also placed in the brazen bull because the people could no longer endure his excessive cruelty to his constituents. Well, what a turn of events. The rack. This has different designs like what we see here, but the idea is the same. The victim is made to lie on the surface and the feet and hands are tied. On the lower side, there is a crank that will be turned to tighten the rope tied to the victim's feet until it answers the questions of the investigators. When the investigator is not satisfied, the twisting will continue until the victim's body separates. This particular rack has spinning sticks with little spikes to make the torture even worse. Other designs have fire under it. This one is like a ladder. In addition to stretching the victim's body, water will be poured over the victim's face to drown him or her. The wheel. Like the rack, it also has a variety of designs. Its first style is said to be tying a person to a wooden wheel and then rolling it down a rocky hill. If not dead, the victim's body will definitely be seriously injured. Another style is after tying the victim to the wheel is spun like this. It's easy, isn't it? It's not that brutal. But sometimes it is placed with spikes at the bottom, scraping the flesh and skin of the victim. And sometimes there is a fire at the bottom. Well, you know how this works. Another style is to have the wheel mounted on an A-frame like this or a pole like this. But before tying the victim to the wheel, he or she is first crippled. And it's not just a small injury because metal is used for beating, so the bones are actually broken. Then the victim is left with the wounds exposed to the sun for the people to see and hopefully deter people from committing similar crimes. Just imagine how painful it is. Even though the victim is still alive, he or she will not last long because of his or her serious injuries. Pillory. These are two parallel wooden pieces with holes for the victim's neck and hands. Once it is locked, the victim cannot escape. This device itself is not dangerous, but it is done in front of many people to embarrass the victim. Its effect is more psychological. When people don't like the victim because of the weight of his crime, they will throw stones at him, dead animals, or feces. And when the crime is very serious, some parts of the victim's body are whipped or cut off. When the crime is light, there's a chance that people will feel sorry for the victim and they will help him to be freed. Pier of Anguish. It is a pier-shaped torture device made of metal that opens into 3 parts when this knob is turned. When the accused are heretics, the device is inserted into the mouth. When the accused is said to be gay or homosexual or a witch, the device will be inserted into the private part of the body. Then, this knob will be twisted to widen the size of the tip. Although it's not really a fatal device, it will cause a severe internal bleeding. Judas Cradle. Also known as Judas chair, it is a pyramid-shaped chair. The victim is suspended using a rope tied to his body. The victim will then be slowly lowered down with his butt going towards the pointed part of the chair. The lowering of the rope will continue as long as the investigator or the punisher is not satisfied. This is not fatal, but like the Pier of Anguish, it will cause severe internal bleeding or death eventually. Iron chair. This device is simple, but its effect is more focused on the psychological aspect of the victim, like the pillory. It has spikes all around, but not very sharp, just enough to injure the victim. Another design has a hole in the seat through which the heat of the fire escapes from underneath. Victims who undergo this torture usually watch another person being tortured using a different device. It is said to be meant to make the victim confess his guilt or to answer questions. If it is not effective, the victim will be subjected to other torture. When released, there is a high chance that the victim will also die due to infection because of the wound from the spikes. Medieval cage or gibbeting. It is often the lifeless body of the criminal that is kept here in the cage to be displayed to the public so as not to set a precedent. Sometimes, the person is still alive and is left outside in the sun and without food until he or she dies. It is said that those placed in the gibbet cage are often men because the remains of female criminals are dissected for study. Head crusher. Just by the name, you already know what it is. It has a mechanism like the Pier of Anguish. Just turn this part of the device, and the part called the helmet will go down, which in turn will push the victim's head down. This is a very brutal device because the victim will slowly feel his head split open and his eyes gouge out until the interrogator is satisfied with the victim's answer. But when the torture is stopped and the victim is still alive, he will have permanent severe damage to his skull. The stake. This is a simple torture but very fatal. This is said to be the last torture that an accused will go through. This means that the victim may have many wounds already on his or her body from previous tortures. After tying the victim to the stake, the wood surrounding it will now be set on fire. And because the victim has many wounds already, his burning will be more painful. When it's windy, it takes longer for the victim to die, which only adds to his or her suffering. It is said that sometimes the victim's tongue is even cut out to make his voice sound different when he or she screams while burning. Again, as with other tortures, the audience then were amused by this kind of event. Spanish donkey, also known as wooden horse or wooden pony, is a triangular-shaped chair with small spikes. The victim is made to sit naked on the wooden triangle where the spikes sit. Then, the victim's foot is tied at the bottom, or maybe tied with weights like these so that he or she sits tighter on the spikes. Just imagine how painful it will be and cause severe bleeding and eventually death. Rat torture. Just by the name, you already know that it uses large rats as torture. One style is to trap rats in the victim's face with a metal cage like this while the victim is tied up. Sometimes, the stomach or chest of the victim is wounded and the rats are placed there still inside the cage. They say that rats don't really eat people. It is said that they are forced to bite the person because they are imprisoned and want to escape, causing the victim to get more injured and eventually die due to infection and rabies. Which torture device do you think you can endure? Put your comments below. We also have a video about Viet Cong booby traps, which are also very brutal. Watch it now.